So with that, I'm going to call to order the Board of Finance for the City of Burlington on May 18th, 2026, and it is 4:33 p.m. Our first item is the agenda. Is there a motion on the agenda?
To adopt the agenda.
By Councilor Barlow, seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Any questions, comments or questions before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Next is our public forum. It's the practice of the board to first go to members of the public in the room and then online. Is there anyone here in the public who would like to address board finance? Okay, we'll go online. Online, former City Councilor Sharon Busher. Good evening or afternoon.
Good afternoon. I have three separate comments in no particular order. The first has to do with the Heineberg Senior Center, and I'm hoping I'm hoping that their request will be granted. And I know that that's a big ask, but I am concerned about this being the only senior center, and the multi-gen center worked really well when it was, it served its purpose. There was senior and childcare, and it worked wonderfully. And then, that closed and then moved. Then we relocated seniors, and then that closed in St. Joe's to now just one center, which has been in existence for a long time. I think the issue is, and I think there would be more of a need. I think the issue is access. People live in their homes, and access to a senior center is challenging, but it's vital to keep people engaged. So that's our challenge. I wish AARP could help, and I guess other agencies, but that's a concern that I have. Number two is, I don't know if the BED director's there, but I have I certainly would like the rate not to increase, but that's not my issue. My issue is that there's so much chatter around the closure of McNeil, or, how detrimental McNeil is. And I'm not going to talk about that issue, but I feel that we miss an opportunity because those people who are engaged in that conversation know the issue well, but then there are those who just see that chatter and don't know. And my ask is that we more regularly give the public the portfolio of power sources. How much is from hydro? How much is from wind? How much is from solar? And I know that's a moving target, but if you could reflect on the previous year and say, for example, last year, this was the mix of our power sources. I just think that needs to get out there in other ways. And I don't think enough people are aware that we are doing more than just burning wood. So anyways, that's my second request. And then the third one has to do with TIF, and it has to do with the $14 million shortfall. And if we don't meet that, if we don't secure those funds, it will result in a partial restoration of Bank Street, and only maybe one block as opposed to two. And my statement is the block that is going to be underfunded is the one that terminates in South Winooski Avenue. And that top portion of Bank Street is where the marketplace is, and it's very visible to the public. So I am concerned about, if we don't meet our target, I really hope more time is spent on how we best use those funds, so that we make amenities that are visible and helpful to the visitors, public, businesses, etc. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else online? Not seeing anyone else besides these steps. So with that, I will close public forum and we'll move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Adopt the consent agenda and take the action.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion on the consent agenda before we vote? Councilor Travers.
It's okay. You can call me Ben. And sorry, I'll be there in just a moment. Just to confirm, the item regarding the Champlain Parkway, that is still on the consent agenda. Yes, as posted.
Correct, item 3.4.
Okay. Not a time for debate on this. Want to mention that I am very glad to see this on the consent agenda. But I do think I see our DPW friends there, very tiny in the back of the room here on my phone. And just wanted to note that I am hopeful to have a discussion here over the coming weeks about how the new traffic signals are operating at the corners of Pine and Maple and King, and how we think volumes may change once the connection to the interstate is open, and what additional work is going into sort of testing and working on the timing of those intersections to align with different times of day and different traffic flows. So not really a point for the item on the agenda, which I'm thrilled is there. I think we're ready to see it open. So that's great, but do hope to continue the discussion over the coming weeks regarding the timing of those intersections.
I'm seeing nodding by the director of DPW. Thank you. So with that, any further discussion on the consent agenda before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to our deliberative agenda, item 4.1 is involving CEDO. It is the Waterfront TIF substantial change request. Hi.
Cara Almastrawi, Director of CEDO. I am joined by David White of White and Burke, who is our TIP consultant. I am also noting that Ashley Parker is online as well as Laura Wheelock, both of whom can be helpful should there be any questions. We are bringing to BEPC, the Vermont Economic Progressive Council, which is the statewide body that manages TIF. We are bringing to them a substantial change request. As part of that process, we need to first bring it to you before we can bring it to them. Unlike our last substantial change request, I think this one's a little bit easier. And it involves what I would term some housekeeping and house cleaning to make sure that we are fully updated with BEPC. It includes changes to the affordable housing delivery, noting that developers are not using any public subsidies. It updates the development agreement that governs this project, including awards and accepted grant funding that have been added to the project, revised schedules and assumptions, some legislative clarification that's making its way right now through the State House, and updated financial projections. Ken, are you able to share?
I hope so.
Yes, you are.
There we go.
Okay, and David will share his screen and give you some more detailed updates, and then we'll hear the questions.
Again, I'm David White, President of White Burke Real Estate Advisors and consultant to the city on both its tax and income financing districts. And Cara, you have stolen most of what I was going to say, but
Sorry.
that's quite all right. This is regarding the substantial change request. BEPC, the Vermont Economic Progress Council, requires that we come back to them from time to time when there've been, there's anything substantial changing in terms of funding, in terms of scope, in terms of et cetera. And most of this, as Cara said, is really housekeeping. And I don't think there's anything here that you as a city council haven't seen before. You've incrementally, no pun intended, looked at various things, whether it's changes in arrangements with the developers involved here, whether it's changes in terms of the scope of financing, the grants that have been received, so forth and so on. So this is I think from your perspective, there's little to nothing new here. Hopefully this will actually move. There we go. So very quickly, just to remind people, this is Waterfront TIF District. Most of the TIF district expired at the end of fiscal 25, so June 30th of 2025. There are only 3 properties left involved. The 2 that are under construction right, well, actually the south building's complete, the white building on Bank Street, but the north building along Cherry is under construction, plus the portion that faces on, so-called phase 2 that faces onto the Church Street Marketplace. That includes the old LL Bean building. That one is so-called phase 2. As I said, there's little new here for the city council, but the purpose of this is to update VEPSI. The last time we were in front of them was 3 years ago with substantial change, and there have been quite a few in the way of details that have changed since then. So the overview very quickly, we talked about the north and south buildings, phase 2, the public improvements. The core here is to reconnect Pine Street and St. Paul Street, as you know, between Cherry and Bank, and to rebuild Cherry and Bank Street. And the incremental taxes from the new development, the private development, will pay the debt for the costs of those improvements. Image of the south building and a little bit of the north building on here. Okay, so the changes, most of which Cara already mentioned, the grants that have been received, the 12 million in the congressionally directed spending, that was one of the last things that Leahy did before he retired. The $22 million raise grant that's going for rebuilding the streets. Those have allowed the expansion of the public improvement scope. That's what PI stands for. There have been detailed changes on the Burlington Town Center design. The exterior of the building is substantially the same as last time VEPSI saw them, but there have been a lot of interior design changes in terms of the units, the hotels, and so forth. And so there have been changes in terms of total number of units and so forth. Key here is one of the major changes since then is the delivery of the affordable housing that Cara touched on. At the last time they saw this, VEPSI saw this in 2023, those were going to be done by Champlain Housing Trust. They're now being done by the developer. And one of the big pluses with that is that there's no public funding involved there. So the funds that would have gone into those units are now freed up to do other affordable housing in the state of Vermont. Since then, we've also done the final bonding that just happened earlier this month, I believe. And we are also updating them on the investment earnings from the interim financing. There is an update to the related cost budget. That is one thing that you haven't seen the details of previously. That is, I think, maybe the only thing here that is new. It's not a major change, but it is because of the costs of the state audit, which were higher than certainly we anticipated, and then thinking about potential inflation and costs, we've simply added some additional funds to the budgets because this is going out through 2035. So we're looking at the next 9 years and saying, maybe we need to have some more funds available. We're also updating them on the amendments to the development agreement and the pending legislative change. Bottom line here is that with all of that, the updated public improvement budget is substantially larger because of the grants. We're up to about a $71 million total budget. We do estimate that by the end of the life of the TIF district, which 2035, actually it extends to 2036 because there's some closeout costs at FY36. At any rate, that there'll be about a $4 million surplus. I will be clear that that doesn't include any potential incremental value or taxes from phase 2, which is again the portion that's not currently under construction that fronts on Church Street, includes the LL Bean building. To be conservative, the estimates attribute zero new incremental value to those buildings and new incremental taxes. We do anticipate there will be development there over the next 9 years. It will generate new taxes and there will be a larger surplus is what we're anticipating, but they're not currently included in the estimates that are provided. And so that's what that last comment is. Phase 2 may generate a much larger surplus. And that's it.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Questions or comments from the board? Councilor Carpenter.
You mentioned the phase 2 and there will be development, I think. How much time do they have? I mean, isn't enough time left, is there?
There's about 9 years left on the TIF district. The owner of that portion of the property is not the local developer.
Right.
The majority owner is Don Signage.
Yeah.
He did at one point submit like more recently, probably within the last 12 months, some ideas for permitting and they didn't really.
I mean, it would just seem that like, I don't know. Takes you a couple of years to design and get going.
Yeah.
Thing, and then you gotta build the building, a couple more years. Then you've only got like 5 years left to maybe get anything for the city out of that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, if something is developed, which we do hope and believe will be eventually, then yes, you'll have a larger grand list at that.
Oh, the grand
point.
list, oh,
Yes.
yes, right.
But,
I meant
which is why we are putting it in as 0
Okay,
in this. Because we do not know what that owner is planning to do with that property.
If I may
You
add,
may, please.
if I may add to that. We anticipate, because if that happens, and whether it's in, hits the grand list in 3 years or 5 or 7 years, there will be anticipated surplus. That's above and beyond the 4 million surplus. And at that point, we anticipate going back to the Vermont Economic Progress Council to request to lower the percentages that are retained, because there's really no reason to retain surplus taxes in the TIF fund when they're not needed there. It makes much more sense for those to go back to the education fund and the municipal general fund. And so ultimately, I think the key here is that regardless of when they actually hit the tax rolls, the benefit will go to the education fund and to the general fund.
thanks for that.
I saw our city engineer, Laura Wheelock, come off mute. Did you want us to add anything, Laura?
I did just want to confirm that phase 2 parcel owner does have an active zoning permit that they could redevelop a part of their site from. So there is movement there. It's just at the pace that we expect from that developer.
Thanks, Laura.
Councilor Travers.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I am not 100% familiar with what the statutory guidance is around what exactly triggers the need for a substantial change request. There is quite a bit here, and I agree that generally speaking that it's good to keep things updated, but I also agree with the analysis of most of this being sort of quote unquote housekeeping related updates. And I'm wondering if you can speak to, are there any portions of this in particular that we think are what puts it over the threshold of our actually having to request a substantial change from VEPC? Or, is it any one of them standing alone that from our perspective would do it? I'm just curious which aspect of this we think as a legal matter is actually requiring that we go through this process.
So I'll address that. The triggers for substantial change are, like so many of these things, not crystal clear in black and white. It really becomes a judgment call as to what constitutes substantial. Nonetheless, anytime you've got a significant change in budget, in this case we do as a result of the grants, that alone would trigger it. Similarly, I think it's likely that the shift in how we're delivering the affordable housing likely would trigger it. Although again, there's no specific criterion in that about substantial change that says if that happens. As you know, these sorts of projects are complicated and no two projects are alike. So know exactly what would constitute something that's substantial in one is hard to do, and the rules aren't written to cover every eventuality. But certainly collectively, I think all of this does make that, certainly without a doubt, makes it something that needs to be done. That said, I should be clear that the city's kept the VEPC up to date annually in terms of annual reports, in terms of annual monitoring visits. So in the big picture, I don't think any of this is going to come as a surprise, certainly to the VEPC staff. To the extent that they kept the VEPC board informed, that's an internal matter with them, and I can't say with certainty.
Right. So that was actually my next question on this, which is I know that we can't know exactly how the board will act, but are we anticipating that VEPC should view these changes similarly to how we've outlined them, and that we're not anticipating much pushback from the state. Is that a fair characterization?
I would say so, yes,
Okay, thank you.
but no guarantees.
Understood.
I am mindful of what time it is. We have a lot of items on tonight's agenda. So is there any further questions or comments by the board? Otherwise, we'll see if there is a motion. Mr. Barlow, can I phone a friend?
Sure.
Okay.
I would move to approve the city's substantial change request to Bepsi for the Waterfront TIF district, and to recommend city council approve and authorize city council president Ben Travers and chief administrative officer Catherine Shaw to execute the attached formal request letter.
Thank you very much, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, team. Appreciate it. Moving on to our electric department. 4.2 is the Burlington Electric Department proposed rate change for fiscal year 27. I'm gonna keep the train moving here, so I usually have a little bit more thank you, and you can slowly, but we're gonna keep it moving. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you. I'm joined by Emily online, and Emily's gonna run some slides on the fiscal 27 rate change, and we'll talk through those, and glad to answer any questions. We can be fairly expedited with the slides, knowing that you have a lot of items. So Emily, if you're good to share, we can go ahead. Okay. So we're here tonight for the fiscal 27 proposed rate change. We did cover during the budget presentation the components of our budget and the fact that we would be bringing this forward. We can move to the next slide. So the key item here is that this is the lowest rate change we've had since the pandemic at 2.99%. If you look nationally over the last year, we're at about a 6.1% increase in electric prices. There was a forecast recently for summer that showed a potential 8.5% increase. And if you look over the last 5 years, the national increase has been 38.9%. Burlington has been at 28.7%. So it's never something we enjoy doing to change rates, but we are doing better certainly than the national context, which is important to share. And we've talked a little about this slide as well. This just compares Burlington Electric's experience with relatively low and stable rates and bills compared to a neighboring utility in New Hampshire that relies more on natural gas and is exposed to the market, having much more volatility and higher bills. I'll take this moment briefly to address the comment that Sharon Busher made, just to share that if you go to our website and you go to the About Us tab, our energy, you can see our portfolio of different resources, both pre and post rec transaction. And in 2024, the most recent year for which we've shared data, we were 44% hydropower was the most significant source, followed by wood and wind, and then a little bit of solar. So I encourage folks to check out our website for that. But as you can see, our kind of more diversified mix that's not reliant on market natural gas prices has performed better than the more volatile natural gas focused portfolio has. This was analysis from Rocky Mountain Institute. Emily, you want to take these for the next few?
Sure. So this slide shows BED's rate changes going all the way back to 1980. You can see that in the mid 80s and again in the mid 2000s, there were some pretty significant double-digit increases. The cluster of rate increases to the right of the graph are the most recent rate increases we've had coming out of the pandemic, with, as Darren said, this proposed increase of 2.99% being the smallest of those most recent. This slide shows in green, the amount of a rate change that we have requested versus the amount of rate change that could theoretically have been justified based on a rule of thumb that the Department of Public Service uses. So in every year except 2024, when we essentially asked for what we exactly needed, Burlington Electric has asked for less than what we felt we could reasonably justify. This year, our cost of service, we have not completed it yet, so TBD on what the actual need will be. This graph shows the changes in the cost of BD electricity, which is the green line at the bottom of the chart going back to 2010. We had that 12-year stretch with no rate increases, and then it starts to step up in 2021. Compared to inflation, which is orange over that same period, healthcare costs, purple, and housing in blue. And a similar graph here shows the average cost per kilowatt hour of residential service versus New England, the top line in blue. Other Vermont, which is proxied by Green Mountain Power and Vermont Electric Co-op. And then BED is the green line with little blue, light blue fork, the average cost per kilowatt hour for customers on our energy assistance program. So there remains BD's residential rates, even with this rate change, remain significantly lower than the rest of Vermont and New England. On the commercial and industrial side, BED is still lower than the rest of New England by quite a bit. As compared to the rest of Vermont, we're a little more equivalent. As you can see, the orange and green lines have crisscrossed several times, so we're roughly in line with GMP and VEC's rates for commercial customers. And then finally, this is the total cost to serve per kilowatt hour. Again, BED, the green line, at the lowest level of the chart. And then the last two slides are the estimated effect of the 2.99% rate change on customer bills. This is taking the average residential customer using 419 kilowatt hours. They would see an increase in their monthly bill of $2.75. The average small business customer with a monthly use of 425 kilowatt hours would see an increase of $3.48. And then our energy assistance program remains in effect. That's a 12.5% discount on the monthly bill. So the average EAP customer's credit would grow from $12.09 to $12.45.
And let me just add one other item. It's not specific to our rates, but just something to be aware of is I think over a year ago in our last budget, we had identified that we would pass on credit card fees that would no longer be part of rates. We had a $3.95 charge to use your credit card to pay that also applied to ACH payments. We have worked with a new vendor and we're going to be updating our fee structure such that credit card fees will now be a 3%, not a $3.95 charge, which is more progressive because if you have a $30 or $40 electric bill, paying 3% is going to be far lower cost than paying a $3.95 fee. We also have reduced the ACH to $1, and we also are working with our vendor to have a system where if you want to sign up for kind of auto pay, we'll be able to do that potentially at no cost to the customer. So we're working on those items. We'll be rolling those out this fiscal year. They're not part of our rate change, but we wanted the finance to be aware of that work. And we're glad to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Great. Questions or comments from the board? Councilor Garland.
Just to say that I appreciate BED's strategy of keeping small increases every year going and keeping limits as low as you can versus what we've been doing before where we were having no increases and very large increases when they're absolutely necessary. So
thank you. We're very committed to that. We want to be predictable and make annual adjustments, even if they are more on the smaller side, just to keep up with the costs and not have it be shot to customers in a given year, like we saw in prior. We had a 22 and a 33% rate change back in, I think 20 or 30 years ago. We want to avoid
Yes, we do.
that.
Any other comments or questions before we look for a motion? Looking for a motion then? Council Carpenter,
I would move the motion as shown on city clerk.
thank you, Council Carpenter. Is there a second? So seconded by Council Barlow. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank
You.
you, BED, but stay right there
Yes.
for episode 2 of 4.3, which is an update, updating our public EV charging tariff to include neighborhood chargers.
So I can be quite concise on this.
Love it.
So you may recall we had a pilot program that we launched to have, we had grant funding of 5 chargers that we installed that are pole mounted, where the charging cord drops down to the on-street parking customer. We identified in a public process, working with DPW and others, 5 locations for those in areas of the city that had a high number of renters who might not have off-street parking, high number of income qualified customers who might not have access to charging at home. And with support from the state ACCD, we installed those 5 chargers. Those were at our public charging rate. And we then said, we want a pilot program to allow those customers who are using those chargers to get a discount off peak, the same way we give a discount to our customers who are charging at home. We ran that. It has been successful. We've seen good utilization. And what we're bringing forward this evening is an effort to make that a permanent offering as part of our EV charging tariff. So these chargers, which we're identifying essentially as community chargers for residential purposes, can be provided a discount for off-peak charging the same way we do with our customers who are charging at, in the garage at home. So that's the whole of it. We're glad to provide more detail or answer any questions, but we're really pleased to offer this.
Darren, questions or comments from the board? So
A different, how do they pay for it? Credit card?
There's an app that you can use, and it basically will, yes, through a credit card, but through an app that the charging company has. And once you enter that you're at the location and you put in your login in the app, it'll drop the cord down to you, and then you can use it to plug in. And when you're done, you let it go, and it goes back up.
any other comments or questions?
Just to say that that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, more magic. All
I
right,
learned through trial and error that you have to press the button on the cord to get slack to be able to put it into your vehicle. So we put some signage in for that effect. I was a guinea pig.
for the PSA, is
Yes.
there a motion on this item? Council Barlow,
I move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the general manager of the Burlington Electric Department or their designee to file a revised public EV charging station tariff with the Vermont Public Utility Commission, making permanent and off-peak neighborhood charger rate as described.
thank you, Council Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Council Carpenter. Any further discussion on the matter before we vote? Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you,
Thank you.
Darren. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
On to our next item, item 4.4, which is a resolution from Councilor Ally Schachter, who is see online. We're trying to promote you, Ally, if you can. There you are. Great. This is a resolution authorization. And there you are. You're coming everywhere. 2026. Actually, this is probably the, but it's the authorization to submit the 2026 Burlington 1-year action plan.
We're at,
Sorry.
Yes.
I thought there was
Sorry.
another agenda
We're all in it
item.
together. Yeah, 4.4. Okay.
What?
This is the CETO resolution on CDBG.
Yeah, CDBG.
And I saw Councilor Shaftter's name, and so I am just merging it all together, teamwork. I was happy to have my name.
Yes.
I am not the greatest.
Okay, sorry, your presence confused me.
No,
My apologies. I also have our CDBG program manager, Christine Curtis, who is joining us online. This is related to the public hearing that we had last week, which is how we are planning to disperse our CDBG awards in this coming year. And those are all listed in there. I will note there was a question from the public hearing regarding why the home funds are not outlined, and that is because that is a rolling application process, and we do not yet know who will be applying. Otherwise, it's all the same materials that you saw last week.
Great, thank you, Carl.
Yes.
Sorry, Councilor Schechter, for putting you on the spot. Oh, no, you got it. So questions or comments on item 4.4? Councilor Carpenter.
Will it be any CDBG funds? Do we know?
Well, we are getting CDBG,
So
but
that
yes,
hasn't gotten
760 something thousand, yes.
Okay.
That has not, Christine, I see.
Yeah, hi, yeah, so we are receiving CDBG and home funds. It is, semi-official. It becomes official after Board of Finance and City Council approves this resolution, which essentially allows CEDO to submit the action plan to HUD as it's presented in front of you. This also will allow the mayor to sign all of the federal applications and certifications that we will need in order to receive.
Oh, we lost your audio.
I was just worried the feds might have.
We are
Not-
not seeing we saw this last year as well for the upcoming federal
Yeah.
year budget, that this is a retroactive
Okay.
for prior federal years, which are secure and have been, as Christine would say, 'cause she said it to me. These funds are secure. They've already been acted upon by Congress and signed by the president. Going forward is a question mark. Thanks.
Exactly.
Sorry, my computer froze. Did I freeze out on your end?
No, but we covered you.
I think we got
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. My internet connection's pretty bad right now. Sorry.
Worries. Further questions or comments on this item? Is there a motion? Councilor Carpenter.
Find the motion, but I would move to approve the motion as is listed on city clerk.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Travers. Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And moving on to our last deliberative item, and I'm curious if colleagues in the room might know, or if Councilor Singh is online. This item 4.5 is a resolution authorization, production and installation of the Burlington Safety and Security Guide signage in public spaces. Or perhaps another co-sponsor is ready to present this item.
I think I could probably speak to it.
Okay, Councilor Travers, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the full council will be considering this later this evening, and the intention behind it is to provide signage somewhat similar to the sort of pamphlets that the city has put together and handed out to local businesses, but more available to the public, understanding that when you face public safety challenges downtown in our parks and across the city, exactly which numbers to call and when. So my understanding is that Councilor Singh has been in touch with our colleagues at DPW about their new sign printing capabilities. And I think it's great that we're able to do this and other signs in-house. Assuming the reason this is for the Board of Finance is because to the extent that the city will be printing signs mandated by this resolution that come out of council initiative funds, is my understanding. I believe that Councilor Singh has been in touch with DPW about what the cost of these signs are. It's dependent on the size of the sign. But generally speaking, I believe that the requested amount of $3,000 will allow us to print upwards of 100, 150 signs or so, if I was doing my math correctly, based on depending on the size that we choose. And so I'm fully supportive of this resolution. I think it will be a great resource for folks as they enjoy our community. And I'm also supportive of our spending these funds out of the council initiative funds to support the printing of these signs.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Are there questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion? A short one. Councilor Barlow.
I would move to recommend that the city council approve the attached resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Carpenter. Any final discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And we have done it, we've left enough time, hopefully, for our folks, our visitors not to have to rush through their presentation. So we're on to item 5, which are for informational purposes only, sort of an extension from our number of budget hearing nights. This is to focus on regional programs, and we have a number of community partners in the room. And so I will try to give you each about 10-ish minutes or so, so maybe 3 to 5 to present, and then 5-ish or so to do Q&A, if that works. So we will move first to our first partners, the Howard Center, who will be at Environment 1 on our street outreach programs. Come on up, and if you want to introduce yourselves, I will very gently time you. I did this with all the department heads. I'm just a friendly little timer over here, and I will let you know when we get to about 5 minutes, and then we'll switch over to. Thank you for being here.
So I'm Scott LaValle, Assistant Director of Crisis Services at Howard Center.
I'm Tammy Buddha, Howard Center's street outreach team.
I wish our work was as straightforward as some political institutions. Just to start, the funds that we did receive this year, it secures a partnership and shows value in the work that we do. The city values that partnership. We're able to continue to work. The program doesn't provide services that are reimbursable through Medicaid. So sometimes funding these things is complicated. Low barrier services with an emphasis on prevention. So anytime we can get some money that's secure, it allows us to put a little more focus on the work rather than trying to find out how we're going to pay for it. I guess the ask would be, if there is one, would be to continue that. That'd be fantastic. And then awareness around, even with the team of, we got 5 now, right? We look at team capacity with 1 program coordinator at 7 with the coordinator. I think it's reasonable to have a team larger than that. And what we do know is that we haven't saturated the demand with our current team. So we would always be able to increase capacity, provide more services. That would be the awareness of that. And Tammy can get into like the details of what those services will look like. I think we run into things like if someone takes a day off, we run, down staff. We're providing services 7 days a week with a small team from 8:30 in the morning to 8 at night. So we're running pretty thin at times. So I know we're missing opportunities to connect people. Tammy and I were just talking of, in recent years, not only are people interacting with having acute symptoms, their situation is also complicated. I'll let Tammy kind of elaborate on the inner workings of that.
Yeah, so I think just to give a brief overview of what we do, like Scott was saying, there's a team of 5 of us. One of us is permanently embedded in the library, so he doesn't have the mobility, but we are able to use him as like a base for a lot of folks. It's also a good place for a lot of folks to connect to services through him. But we would typically, ideally, when we are fully staffed and we have everything under control, we go out into the community and do a lot of proactive work to see how people are doing. If they're doing well, do they need a little more? Are there new people? Have conditions deteriorated? Some of it's weather dependent. And then, hopefully we get to do that before the phone starts ringing. Calls from the police come in, calls from community partners come in, calls from clients themselves come in, where we have incidents or cases that we need to start working on. What we've been finding recently is that our capacity to do a lot of the proactive work of getting out into the community and just being in space, being in City Hall Park, being on a bench on Church Street, waiting, giving people the opportunity to pass by us and connect, has really kind of, we still have it, but it's lessened because we are often spending a lot of time on very acute, complicated situations, and they're complicated for a lot of reasons, like a lot of other systems are running really at capacity, so it's hard to get them services. So we are doing more of the legwork, doing more of the push and pull with other providers, making cases, doing interim case management, kind of trying to handhold the folks, support them until we get them to the appropriate place.
We have a lot of input. We don't always have great way for the output.
Yeah.
Service providers are at capacity also. So Tammy says we'll end up holding people, trying to make sure they stay connected to someone
Right.
for 3-4 weeks sometimes, whereas it's in the past, it's been more, a couple days, and we could help them get connected. I think another thing is, I think the situation table highlights some of that complexity. And I think Jeff sent out a data report a couple weeks ago, and we looked at it, and Tammy and her team, Howard Center, is involved in like 90% of the filter 4 teams going out, putting the outreach and connecting. Because they know a lot of the individuals that we're trying to connect with. And we're not on the bringing it to the table end, but we're on the helping once people bring it there. So I think that, right, we're on the resolution side of those things. I think that's just the, I want to say disparity, but that's we're not bringing a lot of cases, we're helping. So I think that just shows value in the team.
Well, that's like the nature of our work, is like we're sort of a conduit from the street to other providers. Like we are flexible enough that we know what the parameters are around people getting into different programs. And a lot of the times where our holding is that we see that people are in need, and they're expressing that they're in need, but there are steps that they need to take before they are able to get into treatment, or they haven't quite reached a threshold before they can get to treatment. So we monitor and maintain them while we get there. And we're very, okay, I was just gonna say, we are very grateful as a team to be able to like step up our game and be involved in that sort of resolution type work, because I feel like it's where we are uniquely situated to be able to do that. That being said, I think the service that we offer could be much more robust and proactive if we had the opportunity to do more, like just on the street canvassing, seeing how people are doing in the beginning of the day like we used to.
Tammy, what do you decide this year? We'll open it up for comments or questions from the board. You have about 5 minutes as well. Just to keep going. Councilor Carpenter.
Great program, fully supportive. I wonder what kind of conversations there's been with the state about we need to fund you because it's not Medicaid eligible. And so, is there a path within this? And I was sort of maybe addressing this a little bit to the mayor too, around, getting some funding for the non-Medicaid eligible folks who really present all the same problems, that simply they don't match the Medicaid.
And they may become Medicaid eligible, but many of them aren't even enrolled.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll briefly just take that side, because as the legislative session wraps up, there are 2 angles for which we've been advocating with our team on behalf of the whole city. One is to maintain there's been annual fundings for one-time funding for the Community Resource Center, which is a really important resource, working in partnership that is held by CBOEO, not Howard. But that is money that right now is secured in a bill moving towards the end of the finish line, and we've been advocating to protect that funding for this upcoming year, state fiscal year. The second is in another bill currently in it, I don't know what the final taste of the session, is another bill that puts I forget the amount now, but I think it's about $500,000 aside for municipalities in the state who have a disproportionately high number of unhoused individuals for local support, basically filling the thing that we've been doing hyper locally on our own with local funds, and we've been advocating hard to keep that in. That's still in the bill at this moment. I think it would be hard to believe that a city that is that it would be more disproportionately impacted by the homelessness crisis in the state than the city of Burlington. So that would be a pool of funds, new funds that we would be drawing from, but we don't know until the legislative process is over. Yep. Councilor Barlow.
Thank you for everything that Howard does on the state outreach program. One of the things I'm interested in knowing more about is you talked about an opportunity potentially augment current capacity. I'm wondering about hours of operation and current hours of operation on there. If there's any opportunity to work later, because it's my understanding on this event that is at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. So yeah, right now we're from 8 o'clock at night until, or 8 in the morning until 8 at night and 10:30 to 6 on the weekends. I mean, I think we could work possibly later, if we had more staff. The thing that we've always gone back and forth about with that though, is that once you get past a certain hour, there's not much that we can do because there are no other providers or other services open. So a lot of the things would be more like, okay, well, we met with you now, we'll follow up on this tomorrow. And so we've always wondered, would it be more effective to like have somebody on call, have a pager kind of thing, just to like suss out what the actual need was and if we would have like a consult available as opposed to a live person, because we just don't want to put, we don't want to waste that kind of money.
I think what you get into too is, so first call is a mandated program.
Right.
Howard Center has to run 24/7, have 65 crisis team. First call, so as soon as you start getting into that, that's a mandated program that has to exist, it has to be paid for. So, and as soon as you look at expanding a program that's already not fully funded, then money becomes a big concern. Or this first call, around the clock, it has to be there, it's already paid for.
The reason I bring it up is because obviously ending at 6 PM on a Saturday when like we have a lot going on in the downtown, we have people in crisis acting out. And I've seen street outreach workers like dealing with those situations quite effectively. And I would think that if we had expanded hours, it could be a potential deterrent. Even if you can't connect people in the real time, just to like people you have relationships with, addressing them in crisis in that moment. That was my interest, understanding that
Yeah.
a lot of the things that you need to connect them to may not be available. I think it's still valuable service.
Thank you, I'm not against it.
We probably have time for one more question or comment. Or Councilor Travers.
I'll just make a quick comment and then we'll be happy to follow up on it. I mean, I echo the comments of my colleagues here about the appreciation for the work that your team does. So I'm fully supportive of our continuing to maintain this relationship at this level. I'm also interested in the questions so Carlo raised here, and I guess a related question to that, which again, happy to discuss after this evening, is sort of what the current relationship is between you all and our community support liaisons at the city level. Are you finding that that relationship is complementary to each other? Are there any points for improvement on that end as well, which maybe goes hand in hand with respect to hours and coverage and who's doing what work? So we'll be interested in continuing the discussion. I think it's a longer one.
With that, thank you very much.
Thank
you,
you.
Scott, for being here and being our first partners at the table. Model well for your colleagues in the room. Thank you. And we'll now move on to item 5.2, which is with our partners from the Home Health and Hospice organization under UVN Health. Welcome. Want me to share slides? Okay. Hey, 1 second.
Yeah. I'll introduce myself, Christine Wernicke. I'm the president of Home Health and Hospice in Health. We were established 120 years ago as VNA, right here in Burlington. So while the slides are coming up, I just want to thank you for having us. Really appreciate you having the opportunity to share a little bit about our organization and what we're up to. Feel really proud actually to be here with Howard and Turning Point and Heineberg. So we began in 1906, as I mentioned, 120 years ago, really acting in response to public health emergency for infants. So a lot of people think of the care that we provide as generally supporting the older generation, which is predominantly what we do, but we started out in a response to caring for infant mortality in Burlington. We are a member of the Health Network, and we have and always have been one of the most affordable aspects of healthcare delivery in the healthcare system. And so we're proud of doing that. And we will continue to work on that. We are a separate 501c3, and so we'll explain a little bit more about our funding in slides. I do want to share, as the slides come up, we had a couple of, we can go to the next slide. We got a chance to care for an individual that was unhoused, Burlington resident Jamie Richland, in our medical respite program. And we also have been caring for other Burlington residents through our postpartum care program. So these were just a couple of quotes from some Burlington residents. Next slide. So these are just an at a glance for you to take a look at. I won't read them to you. Just generally, our impact is on any given day, we care for over 1,000 individuals in Chittenden and Grand Isle County. We would fill many of the hospitals if we all of a sudden stopped caring for people in the community when there wouldn't be places to go. So we do operate 24/7, 365 and delivering care for individuals in the community. So overall, in fiscal year 25, we cared for 822 Burlington residents, and those residents represent about 20% of the total number of people in households that we care for in 2025. These are snapshots of the visits that we provide. Another way to think about it is that we make a visit in Burlington about every 23 minutes. And it's really from a team of interdisciplinary folks. So nurses, LNAs, they're providing care for people who have been injured or recovering from a chronic illness, individuals who are at end of life and needing end of life care, long-term care. So individuals who need help, and that's the personal and homemaking care. And this year, we kicked off a little less than 12 months ago, our medical respite program, which is post-acute care for unhoused individuals. We have taken care of 6 individuals in that program. We partner with CBOEO, and then we have a department. This gives you a glimpse of revenue and expenses and just highlights that about 6% of the revenue that we get is from community support. And with that, we still use dollars. We have expenses that exceed the revenue that we're able to bring in through predominantly funded through Medicare and Medicaid. And philanthropy has always been an important part of really us making sure that our budget is met and helping to sustain the agency. There are many services that also do not have any funding through Medicare, Medicaid, or commercial insurance. And so we do provide that care without reimbursement models. So our funding does go back decades. We request funding from all the cities and towns in our service area. This is something that all VNAs in Vermont do. This has been something that we've provided as, if you go way back in time, many towns were hosting and paying for a town nurse. The VNAs, as we were expanding, made arrangements to say, like, I think we can provide that service. And so there were a lot of services set up. And so that has what really been the foundation of that. Just to give a sense of the funding in terms of what it looks like for Burlington in the context. Burlington falls right at the mean in terms of per patient, so per patient served, as we look at other communities and other towns, and a little bit lower than the median when we look at per population. So the amount of funding per town by the town population. So just to give you a sense of like how that has run and where that is. We also do receive investments as being part of UVM Health to support operation of McCord Miller Respite House, which is our inpatient hospice home. Some of those programs that I mentioned regarding like longitudinal unfunded care. And then we receive some support by being part of the health system. We save on back-end services that are shared, such as finance, accounting, HR. So that's what that's. I think that's the summary that I wanted to cover.
Exactly. But yes, all right. We'll open it up to the board for questions or comments. Counselor Carpenter.
In the hospice program, which I'm very familiar with, they have so much free services that you don't get in the regular programs. And it just eludes me. Why is it all free in hospice and not on a long-term care side? And is there a way, I mean, I've personally been involved with circumstances where the patient may be able to pay for it, but it's still all free. And this is things like the pens, the bed, I mean, this is a ton of free stuff, and I'm just always been sort of curious about that, even when the patient can pay.
Yeah, so the hospice program really, whether they're covered under Medicare, Medicaid, or commercial insurance, what most Medicaid and commercial insurances do is they just pick up the Medicare model and they match it. This is one of the programs in which you see that across the board where they just copy that Medicare program. And that Medicare program was designed many, many years ago, about 40 years ago, and hasn't really been updated since. And we get a per diem rate to cover, we're required to cover all of those services within our per diem rate. And so the DME, the supplies, medications, like so pharmacy, all of that is required to be covered through our per diem rate. The community-based long-term care is not set up that way. It's a very different reimbursement system. And so it is much more piecemeal and almost like kind of a fee-for-service type of, and just not structured to support some of that. I strongly agree with the need for different long-term care funding, especially with the aging demographic.
Well, it was more of really about revenue generation and, whether you had an opportunity to generate more revenue through those services. I understand how it works. I'm just curious, could you charge for more services?
We used to have a private service in which we charged. We found that there was a fair number of those providers in the community that were doing that, and we opted to partner with those providers to kind of bridge with them rather than having that baked in. It was not something that was a big part of our program, but I do think it's worth revisiting to see where we could generate more revenue.
Well, because of my personal interaction.
Yeah.
I've seen circumstances where I'm quite sure the patient could contribute.
We've looked at other things such as like just extended services with remote monitoring, following up with a nurse and therapies. That's what as well.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Other questions or comments? Councilor Trevor.
Well, I just want to know for the record that I am professionally employed by UPM Health, and so I stay here at the table because this is an informational item. But when this comes up for a decision, I will.
Thank you for stating that for the record. Any other questions or comments? See, or Councilor Newbeezer. Okay, I know his first name's tonight. I don't know. Hold on today. Councilor Newbeezer.
Carter's good too.
I know when I'm trying to be professional, y'all. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming and speaking to this. I don't have as much of a question as a kind of quick comment. I have spoken before in CDNR and have spoken in past budget cycles and plan to speak to this cycle as well as we're talking about the regional programs budget, that I'm not supportive of city funding and going to home health hospice. And I want to make clear why and speak to that for a moment. So one, I just want to again thank you for the presentation and thank you for all the work you do. I think this is incredibly affordable healthcare. It's a critical piece to our healthcare system, the services that you all provide. And I'm biased because I love the union that just formed in home health hospice. However, I do have this sort of fundamental problem with us supporting this program, which is that prior to you all being incorporating into the health network, it makes a lot of sense to me why localities would step up to support this critical piece of healthcare, particularly for seniors. And given the fact that it's so low cost, makes a lot of sense. Now that it is part of the health network, because of the dynamic of the health network being, having massive amounts of money in reserve. I think they, between 2018 and 2024, increased their reserve funds by $1 billion. At the same time, they are a huge driver of why Vermont has the highest cost of insurance. I mean, we're close to, on our insurance premiums, almost double that of Maine or New Hampshire. And if we look at sort of some of the price gouging that the legislature has started to address in sort of incremental ways with reference-based pricing, if you look at, for example, infusion drugs, UVM Health Network upcharged an average of over 500%, which is the largest in the country for those particular drugs. I think it's a list of 20 or something like that. So given that context, and given the fact that leaders, at the same time that the cost of healthcare has increased dramatically, the cost of insurance premiums have increased dramatically year over year, really since right before the pandemic, I'm struggling to see why our local municipal government, or really any municipal government, frankly, should be contributing a significant amount of money for us. I think in the $100,000 to $150,000 range over the last couple of years, when we know that the UVM Health Network does move money in between entities all the time, right? Like there was tens of millions of dollars moved between the medical center and their facility in New York, for example, in the last few years. So for those reasons, and you're happy, I'm happy if you'd like to speak to this, but I kind of wanted to lay out why I have a concern. It's not because of the services you provide, but I'm struggling to justify against the taxpayer expense, given the other money and the other choices that they could make financially in their budgeting process. So I will stop my rant for the day there. Thanks all.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. You're invited to respond, or it's up to you.
I don't know that there's a response that I can provide regarding home health and hospice. They are a separate budget. We do have to provide here, and we're committed to doing that. So yeah, we have spoken, and I understand the concerns. Those are being addressed. They're real concerns. We have to be affordable for Vermonters. We hope to be a part of that.
Yeah, and with that, we are at time for Councilor Carpenter. So any follow-ups can certainly be directed to Christine or her team.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. To your team as well. And so with that, we're gonna keep the train moving. We're almost there. We're gonna move on to the Heineberg Center.
You want me to run the
Yeah.
slides? I don't have your slide.
I can run them.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Andrea Vietz. I'm the director at the Heineberg Community Senior Center in the new north end of Burlington, founded in 1971. We've been caring for older neighbors in Burlington for 55 years, which makes the center kind of a senior as well. Next slide, please. We are an independent 501c3. We don't get any state or federal funding. We have a magnificent team of 3 part-time staff, including myself, which is just under 2 full-time equivalents, and a team of more than 75 volunteers that provide leadership for various classes, that do fundraising, that wash the dishes after lunch. We're on track to serve more than 500 older adults in this fiscal year. And we've recently expanded our meals program by 40% because of demand. And we're looking at extending our hours into Fridays as well. Slide, please. Internally, we spend about $30,000 on meals, purchasing groceries, paying a very part-time cook, purchasing farm shares from the Intervale year-round, as well as eggs. The farm shares and eggs are distributed weekly in the summer and bi-weekly in the winter for free to participants. Lunches are also free. We do not get any funding from AgeWell for our meals, nor from Vermont Food Bank for the Intervale shares. And there are perhaps some reasons that I can speak to, but we do not, and I don't expect that to change in the near term. Slide, please. We do a lot of prevention work. A lot of the health and wellness classes that we offer are falls prevention. They prevent osteoporosis, maintain core body strength and flexibility. And I just was talking with Dr. Julie Beyer today about scheduling a hearing screening next month. One of the early things that can happen to us if we start losing some hearing is really a withdrawal from socializing, because it becomes more difficult to participate in a conversation. So identifying that early is a really helpful thing. Slide, please. The other core of what we do, that's an ironic word, is socialization and prevention of loneliness. And the US Surgeon General has told us that lack of social connection increases risk of premature death by 26%. Chronic loneliness has the impact of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So as you can see from those slides, the folks in our programs are happy and connected. They are celebrating birthdays and going apple picking and going to the Rokeby Museum. That slide in particular is some folks who probably had not been to a museum before. And that was from a couple of years ago, and it was a really meaningful trip. We do that every year on Juneteenth. Slide, please. That kind of social connectivity really improves health outcomes. People have better cognitive abilities. They have better recovery from a fall or an illness. They have lower blood pressure and healthier eating habits. And you'll see in the corner, we partner with a number of different programs at UVM. That's a med student. They came as part of their public health partnership this fall and did some research work with our older adults around both nutrition and activity. Slide, please. We go out, we go to Flynn, which was great this year. We go to the Fleming Museum and the Rokeby. We went to Very Merry Theater a couple times this spring. Pen pal exchanges with students in the elementary school. Restaurant trips to see the lake monsters. So both during the day and also during evenings or on Saturdays, we have folks being out and about. The dancers there are the Heineberg High Steppers who perform at a number of local senior residences in the community. We bring the community in with our connections with UVM nursing students, med students. We have a social work intern. We are currently engaged in Painting Your Story with a creative aging grant from the Vermont Arts Council. And we've been doing some intergenerational Saturday morning art classes. We'd love to partner with BCA to expand that. My idea is to do that one Saturday a month. We have the space and the demand is there. The closure of CORE has led to an increase in participants with fewer resources and more acute needs. And that has demanded a lot of my time and a lot of our social work intern time over the last year. Before CORE closed, our annual budget was about $160,000. This year it's $200,000. Of that $38,000 that we're requesting, we will draw down approximately 20 from September 1st of 2025 through June 30th. So that's FY26, but it just gives you a little bit of insight into the fact that we really are already spending at that level in order to meet the need. And we're seeing an increase in people coming in because we are it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about our programming.
Thank you, Andrea. I'll turn it over to the board for comments and questions. Councilor Parkman.
I also sent you an email last night just for the background, and I want to just make sure for the public. You just highlighted two things, and really should have highlighted three. last year when we were budgeting and the decision was made to close core. It was fairly short notice, and core, I don't have the exact number, but the entirety of their operations is probably several $100,000. In our negotiations, we put aside $50,000 for continued senior services and transition. And I see that as a continued commitment that we've made to our seniors and a source that we could look to fund Heineberg, which has taken the brunt of the additional senior services. So I want to point that out. When we adopted the the Aging Strong Plan last spring, again, in that plan, we noted the transition need and our need to really support Heineberg as our only center and the key coordinator services, which we, as a council, passed unanimously. And then I forgot to note, but will note that going way back in 19, so that part, there was a city council committee that reviewed kind of the pros and cons and what the city needed. And at that time, said we need more support for Heineberg, but it was better that we keep that as an independent nonprofit. And it eludes me how we've created this regional programming bucket and why the decision was made to put it in that versus just a line item, which is really kind of what was committed to in 19.
Thank you, Council Carpenter. Other comments from members or questions from members of the board?
Just to express appreciation for everything you do.
Thank you. It's a great community. It really is.
Okay. Anything else for Andrea? Okay, with that, Andrea, thank you.
Thank you.
For being here. Appreciate it. We're on to our last community partner, Turning Point. 3.7 seconds, missing a word, I think. Welcome.
Everybody, I am Cam Loft. I'm the executive director of the Turning Point Center in Chittenden County, and it's put together kind of a front and back one pager and then a lecture on the comments for folks to.
You want me to put it?
Well, I didn't send anything, so.
We'll get this.
Can I send it after the meeting?
No problem. Yep, sorry.
Thank you. But it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm incredibly grateful for the city of Burlington. And it's historic investment in recovery. It's trust in recovery, and it's real belief that individuals recover. They recover successfully, but they do so on their own time. They do it with compassion, with care, and it takes a community. So things were really desperate at the peak of the pandemic, and the city's investment in the Turning Point Center was originally back in 2014 for approximately $4,500. And the funds that are raised, so we have an annual budget of about 1.5, 1.6 million. 50% of that is in grants and contracts with the state and federal government. Other 25% is funded through some small grants and local municipal funds, and then the other 25% we have to raise through donations, contributions. So as a 501c3, we must raise that percent of our budget in order to really provide the quality care and support for all individuals needing it. And we support individuals, families of folks working towards recovery or seeking recovery, and folks that are still acutely struggling with all substances. So that's alcohol, drugs, marijuana. We also support family members too in their journey in supporting a loved one who's struggling with substance use. So in order to continue to provide 365 days a year of in-person, virtual, over the phone programming, we really rely on our municipalities to support growing demand for our work, the increasing number of folks that reside in each of the towns in Chittenden County, and also the cost of the staffing, the cost of the quality assurance that comes with our programming, So our work as a certified recovery service organization is really enveloped along the continuum of care to treat substance use disorder. So that's prevention, treatment, recovery, harm reduction, and we're embedded in all aspects of where you might expect to experience substance use disorder. Prevention being between the ages of 15, 18, but even earlier and younger. So we work to provide education, lived experience, and also participation on any policy recommendations. On top of that, we support families as they work on their own recovery and help to eliminate cross-generational affect of substance use disorder. So preventing those experiences from being passed down through education and helping family members recover. Our work is embedded within treatment. We've got a program that operates 24/7 up at UBMMC for all units. So if patients identified with a substance challenge, part of any of their care plan, we're paged. And we're there within 20 minutes. We've got staff there between 9A to 9P. And that's a level funded SAMHSA grant that's broken out through the state. And the funds for that program has remained the same since 2019. So that's just an example of how we must request funds to really support the work that's done locally here in Chittenden County, but specifically in Burlington on top of it too. Give an example of the increase in the demand for our work. In 2022, when we have requested for some additional funds and investment from the city, we were presenting approximately 377, I don't have it in front of me, but 377 or so individuals were residing in Burlington, each in our work. We're now up to 551. And that's only the individuals that are accounted for through PI collection and direct service that's provided, where we report out on progress of individuals. We report to them on exactly what their journeys are, how well they're measuring their own goals and reaching those goals. Everything is person-centered. The other half that we do is just the immediate request for support. So we're staffed 365 days a year downtown here in Burlington, thanks to great support from the city. Originally in 2018, helping us secure that property. Support from the hospital. Many major foundations and donors really believed in this work and saw that we have a home in the heart of the city. And to staff that with the certified peer recovery support specialists, 365 days a year for immediate demand for recovery support, navigating journeys with the increasing compounding issues of acuity with substance use and mental illness, also with xylazine and other adulterated substances that we're experiencing, and many other gaps too throughout the care system. We really, really are grateful for the city's investment, really looking for the city to continuously support this work and help us continue. So just kind of a brief review that's there. A couple of our flagship programs, we've got a low barrier peer recovery program. That's our outreach recovery coaching program. That's embedded throughout the emergency housing, temporary housing, low income housing throughout Chittenden County. Much of our work is done downtown here. So helping people navigate from houselessness, where they're either in tents or various encampments and just on the street, getting them engaged to any of the shelter providers, but also supporting them if they're discharged from the hospital. So being discharged from the hospital to the street, if a person's seen in the emergency room, they're without housing, our emergency department team will support them, then also transition them to our outreach recovery coaching program and continue the work that's built, established in the hospital.
We can't, it's over 5 minutes or so I'll open it up for questions and comments from the board. Thank you. Councilor Travers.
Thank you very much for the presentation with all the groups here, very much for the valuable work you do for our community. I think with all these programs, I'm very supportive of this. With all these programs, the question is there there any capacity for the city to do more? And I appreciate your, making the case for that, just in the numbers alone. I am curious if you can speak to, my assumption is that you are providing services to folks in communities outside of the four that are listed here. I'm curious about what the history is behind the communities other than Burlington contributing to Turning Point's mission, and year to year, what efforts are put into going to other municipalities. I mean, ultimately, the question is, why aren't those other municipalities contributing as well, given the level of service that you're providing there?
Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot, happy to talk about that later, but if you're willing to share now, I'm open to hearing.
Of course, so much of that is just repeat requests, presenting to any of the comments, either budget discussion, whether presenting it amongst the towns. Essex Junction has a public application, their agency of human services, it's sort of a whole subsection of the city. Richmond has it open to a vote for the residents that are out there. So the residents are voting directly on that budget request, and that's funds that we receive at our full request amount. And then Williston is a application that we submit directly to the town, kind of proving our cases, why having funds for our work is beneficial to the residents. Other towns, it's really just try again, present and connect with many residents that are there. And then, we're lean but mighty as an organization, really focused on the quality of the support that we provide and our mission. We often don't have the bandwidth of the administrative capacity or on the board level to go and sit in on those key meetings when it's time opened up at the various other municipalities in Chittenden County.
Very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor. Anything else for Kim? Well, we are right at 6 o'clock, Kim. Excellent.
Thank you all
Thanks
so
for
much.
helping us bring it home. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. As I said at the top of this section of the agenda, these were all for information. Thank you very much, our community partners, for being here. With no other business in front of the Board of Finance, I will adjourn the meeting right at 6 o'clock p.m. Thank you.